Admiral Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the stars through the large window. She had been waiting for 3 days. The relief fleet should have arrived by now. Her ships were running low on supplies, and her crew was getting worried. Sarah had been fighting aliens for most of her life. Not the good kind of aliens who lived peacefully in the Galactic Confederation. These were different. They called them the Devourer Swarm. Nobody knew where they came from, but they ate everything. Planets, ships, people, it did not matter. They turned it all into more of themselves. The swarm had appeared 6 months ago from the center of the galaxy. At first, the Confederation thought they could handle it. They had the best technology in the galaxy. They had powerful weapons and smart military leaders. But the swarm was unlike anything they had ever seen. Sarah's communication officer turned to her. "Admiral, still no word from command. Should I try again?" "Yes, keep trying," Sarah said. She tried to sound calm, but inside she felt worried. Something was wrong, very wrong. Humans had joined the Confederation 150 years ago. Back then, Earth was just learning to travel between stars. The aliens welcomed humans because they discovered something interesting about them. Humans were natural fighters. They could think quickly in battle and never gave up. Other alien races were smart, but they did not like fighting. So humans became the soldiers of the Confederation. Sarah remembered the first time she saw an alien. She was just a child then. Her father was a soldier too. He told her that humans and aliens would work together to make the galaxy safe. She believed him. She spent her whole life serving the Confederation. She fought their wars and protected their worlds. But now, watching the empty space where her relief should be, Sarah wondered if she had been wrong. The first attack happened on the outer rim. A mining colony called Hope's End just stopped talking. When the Confederation sent a ship to check, they found nothing. The planet was still there, but it looked different. The surface was covered in a strange metal substance that moved like it was alive. More colonies went silent after that. Each time, the same thing happened. The planets were still there, but they were covered in the moving metal. The Confederation scientists said the swarm was eating the planets and turning them into factory worlds to make more swarm ships. The war began 3 months ago. Sarah led the human fleets in the first major battle. They fought hard and destroyed many swarm ships, but for every ship they destroyed, 2 more appeared. The swarm learned from each battle. They got smarter and stronger. Sarah's second-in-command captain walked up to her. "Admiral, we're getting reports from the defense stations around New Terra. They say Confederation ships are leaving the system." Sarah frowned. "Leaving? What do you mean leaving?" "The ships are jumping to hyperspace, ma'am. All of them, even the command ships." Sarah felt cold. New Terra was the human military headquarters. If the Confederation ships were leaving, that meant they were abandoning the human forces. But why? "Get me Admiral," Sarah said, was the Confederation military leader. He was a tall, blue alien with 4 arms who had worked with humans for many years. The screen lit up, showing his face. He looked nervous. "Admiral, I was hopping to speak with you." "Where is my relief fleet?" Sarah asked directly. Paused. "Sarah, the situation has changed. The High Council has made a difficult decision." "What decision?" "The swarm cannot be stopped with conventional weapons. Our scientists have run all the possibilities. The only way to save the core worlds is to create a barrier." Sarah felt her heart drop. "What kind of barrier?" "The outer rim territories will hold the swarm while the core species evacuate to Andromeda Galaxy. It will buy us the time we need to." "You're abandoning us," Sarah said quietly. His face showed sadness. "The human colonies are brave warriors. You will hold the line with honor. Your sacrifice will save billions of lives in the core worlds." "Our sacrifice?" Sarah's voice got louder. "You mean our deaths? You're leaving us here to die." "The decision is made, Admiral. All non-human personnel are being evacuated. The human forces will continue to fight until—" He did not finish. Until we're all dead, Sarah completed his sentence. Nodded. I am sorry, Sarah. You have been a good friend, but the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. The screen went dark. Sarah stood in silence, staring at the empty screen. Around her, the bridge crew had heard everything. They were all human. They all knew what this meant. Captain broke the silence. Admiral, what are your orders? Sarah turned to look at her crew. These were good people. They had families on the human colonies. They had children who would never grow up because the aliens they had served for so long had decided human lives were worth less than their own. Send a message to all human ships and colonies, Sarah said. Tell them the Confederation has abandoned us. We're on our own now. Over the next few hours, reports came in from across human space. Confederation ships were jumping away from every human world. They took their technology and weapons with them. They left behind only the humans who had served them faithfully for generations. Sarah watched as the last Confederation ship disappeared from her sensors. In the distance, she could see the first signs of the swarm approaching, dark shapes moving between the stars like hungry sharks. She opened a channel to all human forces. This is Admiral. The Confederation has decided we are not worth saving. They think we will die here so they can live safely somewhere else. Maybe they're right. Maybe we will all die. But if we do, we'll die as humans. We'll die fighting. And maybe, just maybe, we'll take these monsters with us. The human ships turned to face the approaching swarm. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. They had no hope of victory, but they were human, and humans never gave up. The first swarm ships opened fire. The real war was about to begin. The battle for New Terra lasted 12 hours. Admiral Sarah watched as her ships fought against impossible odds. The swarm came at them like a dark wave, their biomechanical ships growing larger as they consumed the wreckage of destroyed human vessels. Sarah's fleet had started with 200 ships. Now only 50 remained, but something strange was happening. The human ships were lasting longer than they should. The swarm ships were acting confused, sometimes shooting at each other instead of the humans. Admiral called Doctor over the communication system. He was calling from the research station on New Terra's moon. I think I've found something important. Make it quick, Doctor, Sarah said as another explosion lit up the space around her ship. We're kind of busy. The swarm ships near Lieutenant Park's fighter are moving strangely. They keep bumping into each other like they can't see properly. Sarah looked at her tactical screen. Lieutenant Park was a young pilot who had been flying circles around swarm ships for the past hour. Every time the swarm tried to catch him, they seemed to lose track of where he was. Park, report, Sarah ordered. Ma'am, it's the weirdest thing. When I focus really hard on staying hidden, they act like I'm not there, even when I'm right in front of them. Doctor's voice came through again. Admiral, I need to study a live swarm sample. If my theory is correct, we might have found their weakness. Sarah made a quick decision. All ships fall back to the moon base, cover Doctor's research station. The human fleet pulled back. Many didn't make it. The swarm followed them, but as they got closer to the moon, more strange things began to happen. Swarm ships started crashing into each other. Some just stopped moving completely. Doctor worked through the night while the battle raged overhead. He had captured a small piece of swarm biomatter during the fighting. Under his microscope, he could see it was like a living computer. Billions of tiny parts working together, sharing information instantly. But something was interfering with that information sharing. The swarm pieces near the human base were moving slower and making mistakes. Doctor ran test after test. Finally, he found the answer. It's quantum frequency interference, he told Sarah when she came to check on his progress. The swarm shares thoughts using quantum connections, but something is scrambling those connections. What's causing the interference? Sarah asked. We are, Doctor said quietly, humans. Our brains work on a quantum level that creates interference the swarm can't handle. They literally can't think straight when we're around." Sarah stared at him. "Are you saying humans can disrupt the swarm just by being near them?" "Not just by being near them. By focusing our thoughts. Remember what Lieutenant Park said about focusing on staying hidden. He was unconsciously creating quantum interference that confused the swarm's targeting systems." Over the next few days, Doctor taught human pilots how to focus their quantum interference. It wasn't easy. Most people couldn't do it at first, but some humans, especially those who had spent years in space, could learn to create powerful disruption fields. The human fleet began winning small battles. When human pilots worked together, they could create zones where swarm ships couldn't function properly. But there were still too many swarm ships, and more arrived every day. Sarah gathered her remaining officers on New Terra. They met in an underground bunker while swarm ships circled the planet above them. "We can hurt them," Sarah said, "but we can't win, not like this. We need a bigger solution." Doctor had dark circles under his eyes from working without sleep. "I've been thinking about that. What if we could create a permanent interference zone? Something so large the swarm couldn't cross it." "How large are we talking about?" asked Captain. "All of human space, every system we control. We could turn our own territory into a dead zone for the swarm." "What would that cost?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. Doctor looked down at his hands. "Everything. We'd have to detonate quantum bombs in every human system. The radiation would make most of our worlds uninhabitable. Earth would be destroyed. Most of our colonies would be destroyed. 90% of humanity would die." The room fell silent. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about Earth. She had been born there in a small city by an ocean that was blue like sapphires. She thought about the billions of humans living on colonies across the galaxy, children playing in parks, families having dinner together. "But the 10% who survive?" she asked. "They could live in the quantum dead zones. The areas would be safe from the swarm forever, and humans seem to handle quantum radiation better than other species. We might even adapt to it over time." Captain spoke up. "Admiral, we're talking about killing our own people to save them." "No," Sarah said. "We're talking about saving our species. The Confederation wrote us off. They think we're already dead. If we do nothing, they'll be right. Every human will die and our species will be extinct. But if we do this, some of us survive. And someday, maybe we'll be strong enough to make sure this never happens again." Sarah sent messages to every human colony and ship. She told them about Doctor's plan. She told them the choice they had to make: fight until the swarm killed them all, or sacrifice most of humanity to save some of it. The vote took 2 days. In the end, it was almost unanimous. Humans chose survival no matter the cost. The plan took 3 weeks to prepare. Human ships spread quantum bombs throughout their territory. Scientists worked to identify the safest places for survivors to hide. Families said goodbye to each other, knowing they might never meet again. Sarah stood on the bridge of her ship, now positioned near the asteroid belt where some humans would try to survive. She held a small device that would trigger every quantum bomb in human space. "Doctor, are you sure this will work?" she asked. "As sure as I can be, Admiral. The quantum interference should stop the swarm cold. They won't be able to cross into our dead zone." Sarah looked around at her crew. These were the people who would survive. A few thousand humans scattered across hidden bases in asteroid fields and dead planets. They would have to rebuild their entire civilization from almost nothing. "All human ships prepare for quantum detonation," Sarah announced. "In 10 seconds we change everything. 10, 9, 8. Sarah thought about the Confederation species who had abandoned humanity to save themselves. She wondered if they would ever know what humans had sacrificed to stop the swarm. 3, 2, 1. Sarah pressed the button. Across human space, quantum bombs exploded simultaneously. The flash of light could be seen from distant galaxies. When it faded, Earth was gone. Most human colonies were gone. Billions of people were gone. But the swarm stopped moving. Their ship sat motionless in space, unable to think or communicate. The quantum interference was too strong for them to function. Sarah watched from her hidden base as swarm ships drifted helplessly past them. The monsters that had seemed unstoppable were now just empty metal floating in space. "We did it," Doctor said quietly. "We stopped them." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "Now we have to survive." Commander floated through the walls of her ship like a ghost. 300 years of living in quantum-altered space had changed humanity in ways their ancestors never imagined. Could phase through solid matter, sense quantum fluctuations across light years of space, and share thoughts with her crew without speaking a word. She materialized on the bridge of the ghost ship Revenge, her body becoming solid again as she took her commander's chair. Around her, the bridge crew worked silently, their enhanced minds processing information faster than any computer the old Confederation had ever built. "Report," said, though she already knew what her officers would tell her. Their shared consciousness meant she felt their discoveries as they made them. Lieutenant, a descendant of the legendary Admiral Sarah, spoke without looking up from her station. Long-range quantum sensors detect massive fleet movements in the old human territories. Ships using pre-war Confederation technology, but in larger numbers than we've ever recorded. Nodded, she had expected this day would come. For 3 centuries, humanity had hidden in the quantum dead zones, adapting and evolving. The first generation of survivors had struggled just to stay alive. Many died from quantum radiation sickness. Others went insane from the isolation. But humans had always been good at adapting. By the second generation, children were being born who could handle quantum radiation naturally. They could see things others couldn't see, feel energy patterns across vast distances, and manipulate matter at the quantum level. Their brains had developed new neural pathways that worked differently from normal human brains. The third generation was even stranger. They could phase between dimensions, making their bodies exist in multiple quantum states at once. They could turn invisible, walk through walls, and make their ships undetectable to conventional sensors. Was fourth generation. She and her people were so far beyond original humans that they barely counted as the same species anymore. But they still remembered who they had been, and more importantly, they remembered who had abandoned them. "Commander," said Dr. Park, the chief science officer, "I've identified the fleet composition. These are definitely Confederation ships, but they're using technology that was still experimental when our ancestors fought the swarm. They must have spent the last 3 centuries developing new weapons and shields." "Have they colonized any of the old human worlds?" asked. "Yes, ma'am. They've built cities on New Terra, New Shanghai, and even where Earth used to be." Felt a cold anger flow through the shared consciousness of her crew. Earth had been completely destroyed in the quantum bombing. Nothing remained but empty space and floating debris. Yet the Confederation had built a space station there and called it Memorial Station, a monument to humanity's noble sacrifice. "Any sign of surviving humans?" asked, though she already knew the answer would hurt. Lieutenant's face became sad. "Yes, Commander, we're detecting human life signs on several former colonies, but they're showing up as servants. The Confederation appears to have found humans in old stasis pods and enslaved them." Stood up from her chair, her body flickering between solid and ghost-like as her emotions affected her quantum state. The Confederation had not only abandoned humanity to die, they had returned to profit from human technology and enslave any humans they found. "Send a message to all Ghost Fleet commanders," said. "It's time for the Council of Echoes." The Council of Echoes was the governing body of surviving humanity. Representatives from hidden bases across the galaxy would meet in quantum phase to discuss important decisions. Had been preparing for this meeting her entire life. Within hours, ghostly figures materialized in the council chamber deep inside Asteroid Base Alpha. These were the leaders of the scattered human settlements. Some were as evolved as crew. Others had developed different abilities based on the type of quantum radiation they had lived with. Commander from the Beta Quadrant base could manipulate time on a small scale, making himself move faster or slower than normal. Captain Williams from the Gamma sector had developed the ability to quantum link with technology, controlling machines with her thoughts alone. Admiral Foster from the Outer Rim could sense the emotional states of beings from incredible distances. "My fellow humans," began, "the day we have prepared for has arrived. The Confederation has returned to our galaxy. They think they won. They think we are extinct. They have built monuments to our sacrifice while enslaving our surviving brothers and sisters." The ghostly figures around the table flickered with anger. For 300 years, they had survived in the harshest conditions imaginable. They had evolved beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, and they had planned for this moment. "What do our scouts report?" asked Commander. Lieutenant stepped forward and shared her consciousness with the group, allowing them all to see what she had discovered. The Confederation had grown fat and lazy during their centuries in Andromeda. They had powerful technology but weak soldiers. They relied on automated defense systems and artificial intelligence instead of trained fighters. More importantly, they had no idea that humans still existed. "They use our old battle strategies in their military academies," Dr. Park reported. "They teach human tactical thinking as an ancient art form. They believe they understand how humans fight, but they're using information that's 300 years out of date." Admiral Foster leaned forward. "What about their defenses? Can our ghost fleet penetrate their shields?" Smiled, and her body briefly became completely transparent. "Their shields are designed to stop conventional weapons and energy beams. They can't stop things that don't exist in normal space-time. Our phase technology will pass right through their defenses." "And their sensors?" asked Captain Williams. "Useless against us. We exist in quantum states they can't detect. To their instruments, we might as well be dreams." The council members looked at each other. After 3 centuries of hiding, humanity was finally ready to reveal itself. But this wouldn't be a simple battle. This would be a carefully planned campaign to reclaim what was rightfully theirs and free their enslaved people. "I propose Operation Ghost Storm," said. "We begin with psychological warfare. Let them know that humanity survived. Let them fear us. Then we systematically dismantle their occupation of our former territories." Commander nodded. "And the enslaved humans?" "We free them all, every last one." Admiral Foster asked the question they were all thinking. "And what about revenge? They left us to die." His expression became cold. "We're not going to kill them. We're going to do something worse. We're going to show them what humanity became because of their betrayal. We're going to make them realize they created their own worst nightmare." The vote was unanimous. Operation Ghost Storm would begin immediately. As the council members faded back to their own bases, stood alone in the chamber, she thought about Admiral Sarah, the woman who had sacrificed everything to save humanity. Sarah had died 2 centuries ago, but her descendants served on bridge. The family, like many survivor families, had kept the memory of humanity's abandonment alive through each generation. "Admiral," whispered to the empty air, "we kept our promise. We survived. And now it's time to show the galaxy what humans really are when we stop being nice." Phased through the walls back to her ship's bridge. Around her, the ghost fleet was already moving. Dozens of ships that existed between dimensions, crewed by humans who had evolved beyond anything the galaxy could imagine. The Confederation was about to learn that humanity was very much alive. and humanity had a very long memory. The first attack happened during the night shift on Mining Station 7. The station's security cameras showed nothing unusual, but when morning came, the entire mining operation had vanished. Not destroyed, simply gone. The massive equipment that had been digging into the asteroid was nowhere to be found, leaving only perfectly smooth holes where it used to be. Admiral, now an old alien with gray patches on his blue skin, stared at the report in disbelief. He was the same leader who had ordered humanity's abandonment 3 centuries ago. The Confederation had made him a hero for saving the galaxy from the swarm threat. "How does mining equipment just disappear?" asked his aide, a nervous young alien with too many eyes. "Security says there were no ships on sensors, sir. No energy signatures. No explosions. The equipment was there at 2300 hours, gone by 700. Rubbed his temples. Since returning to the Milky Way galaxy 50 years ago, strange things had been happening. Ships would report phantom contacts that vanished when investigated. Mining operations would find their equipment moved or stolen overnight. Some crews reported seeing impossible things, ships that seemed to exist and not exist at the same time. The worst part was the messages. Someone had been leaving graffiti in places that should be impossible to reach. Inside sealed chambers on the hulls of ships in deep space, carved into the surface of airless moons. Always the same message: "We remember." "Sir," his aide said nervously, "there's been another incident." Sighed, "What now?" The luxury liner Golden Dream was traveling through the old Sol system when they reported seeing ghosts, sir. Ghosts? Human-shaped figures walking on the hull of their ship, in vacuum, without spacesuits. The passengers are demanding to be evacuated. Felt a cold fear creep up his spine. He had been having nightmares lately about Admiral Sarah. In his dreams, she would ask him why he had abandoned her people. He always told himself it was just guilt, that humans were long extinct. But what if they weren't? "Increase patrols in all former human territories," ordered, "and send a message to the High Council. Tell them we may have a problem." 3 star systems away, Commander smiled as she watched communication from her invisible ship. The Ghost Fleet had been conducting psychological warfare for 6 months now. They could phase into Confederation ships, walk through their corridors unseen, and listen to every conversation. His favorite tactic was appearing in the private quarters of Confederation officers late at night. She would materialize just long enough for them to see a human figure, then vanish. The reports of human ghosts were spreading panic through the Confederation military. "Commander," Lieutenant reported, "Scout Team 3 has located another group of enslaved humans. They're being held on Factory Station Omega in the system." "How many?" 237, ma'am. They're being forced to work in weapons manufacturing. The factory produces the same quantum bombs that our ancestors used to stop the swarm." Felt anger surge through her. The Confederation was not only enslaving humans, they were forcing them to make weapons using technology that humanity had developed. It was like forcing someone to dig their own grave. "Prep a liberation team," ordered. "Full stealth insertion. Free the humans and leave the Confederation wondering what happened." The attack on Factory Station Omega happened during the shift change when security was. His team phased through the station's walls like they were made of air. The Confederation guards never saw them coming. Found the human prisoners in the factory's lower levels. They were all from the old stasis pods that the Confederation had discovered on abandoned colonies. Most were from the early 2300s, before the Swarm War. They had been sleeping for over 400 years and woken up to find their entire species apparently extinct and themselves enslaved. "Who are you?" asked one of the prisoners, an elderly man with scars on his hands from factory work. Let her ghostly form become solid so he could see her clearly. "I'm commander of the Ghost Fleet. We're here to take you home." The old man stared at her in shock. But humans are extinct. The Confederation told us we were the last ones. The Confederation lied, said. Humanity survived, we evolved, and we've come back for our people. His team made the rescue look like magic. They simply walked through the station's walls with the freed humans, carrying them in quantum phase bubbles that made them invisible to sensors. The Confederation guards found empty cells and no sign of how the prisoners had escaped, but left something behind. In the factory's main computer, she uploaded a video message that would play on every screen in the station. The message showed his face, clearly human but somehow different. Her eyes seemed to shift between dimensions, and her image flickered like she was only partly there. To the Confederation, said in the message, you abandoned humanity to die 300 years ago. You thought you were safe. You thought we were extinct. You were wrong. We are the ghosts of humanity and we have returned. Every human you enslaved will be freed. Every world you stole from us will be reclaimed. This is not a threat. This is a promise. We remember everything. The video ended with an image that made Admiral's blood run cold when he saw it. The face of Admiral Sarah, the human he had abandoned centuries ago. Word of the ghost attack spread through the Confederation like wildfire. Ship crews began refusing assignments to former human territories. Mining operations shut down because workers were too scared to stay at their posts. The Confederation's stock markets crashed as investors realized their colonies might not be as secure as they thought. Called an emergency meeting of the High Council. The chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of alien species, all looking worried and confused. The reports are getting worse, said. Ships are disappearing. Bases are being robbed blind. Our people are seeing human figures that vanish when they try to investigate. Council member, a tall insect-like alien, clicked her mandibles nervously. You're talking about ghosts, Admiral. Are you seriously telling us that dead humans are stealing our equipment? I'm telling you that something is out there, and it knows human military tactics. These aren't random attacks. They're coordinated operations designed to maximize psychological impact. But humans are extinct, insisted Council member, a slug-like creature who oozed slime when he was nervous. We made sure of that when we left them to fight the swarm. Slammed his fist on the table. Maybe we didn't. Maybe some of them survived. The council chamber fell silent. For 3 centuries, the Confederation had told itself that abandoning humanity was a necessary sacrifice. They built monuments to human bravery and taught their children about the noble warriors who died to save the galaxy. It was easier than admitting they had committed genocide. If humans survived, said quietly, and if they've developed technology we can't detect, what do they want? Before anyone could answer, the lights in the chamber went out. In the darkness, a figure materialized in the center of the room, stood there, her form flickering between solid and transparent. She looked around at the aliens who had condemned her species to extinction. What do we want? Asked, her voice echoing strangely in the chamber. We want what you stole from us, our worlds, our people, our future. Security guards rushed into the chamber, but their weapons passed harmlessly through phased form. You cannot fight what you cannot touch, said. You cannot hide from those who walk between dimensions. You created us when you abandoned us. We are your worst nightmare made real. Form began to fade. This is Admiral of the human ghost fleet. We gave you 300 years of peace. Now it's our turn. She vanished completely, leaving the council chamber in terrified silence. Admiral stared at the spot where she had been standing. He finally understood what humans had become in their centuries of exile. They had evolved beyond anything the Confederation could handle. And they were just getting started. The Confederation's desperation reached its peak when Admiral proposed the unthinkable. In the High Council chamber, surrounded by nervous alien leaders, he presented his final plan to deal with the human ghost problem. We wake up the swarm, he said. The council chamber erupted in terrified chatter. Council members' insect wings buzzed frantically. "Are you insane? The swarm nearly destroyed the galaxy." "The humans stopped it before," argued. "They created quantum dead zones that the swarm couldn't cross. But if we wake up just a small part of the swarm and point it at the ghost ships, the humans will have to reveal themselves to fight it." Council member oozed nervous slime across the floor. "And if we can't control it? Then we evacuate to Andromeda again, but at least the human problem will be solved." The vote was close, but fear won over common sense. The Confederation began preparing a mission to the galactic core, where the swarm had been dormant for 3 centuries. Watched these preparations from her invisible ship. The Ghost Fleet had been monitoring all Confederation communications for months. When she learned of their plan to wake the swarm, she smiled for the first time in years. "They have no idea what they're about to do," told her bridge crew through their shared consciousness. Dr. Park, the descendant of the scientist who had first discovered humanity's quantum abilities, nodded. "Should we stop them?" "No," said. "Let them wake it up. It's time to show them what humanity really learned during our exile." For 300 years, humanity had done more than just hide in the quantum dead zones. They had studied the dormant swarm, learned from it, and discovered something amazing. The swarm wasn't evil, it was just following its programming. And that programming could be changed by beings who understood quantum consciousness. Had spent decades learning to communicate with the sleeping swarm. Humans, with their evolved quantum abilities, could speak to the swarm's collective mind in ways that other species couldn't even imagine. The swarm had been waiting for someone who could understand it, guide it, give it a new purpose. The Confederation expedition reached the galactic core 3 weeks later. They found the swarm exactly where it had been sleeping since the quantum bombing. Massive biomechanical structures floating in space, dormant but still alive. The expedition used powerful energy beams to wake up a small section of the swarm. The results were immediate and terrifying. Swarm ships began activating, their metal surfaces rippling with renewed life. They started moving toward the outer galaxy, just as the Confederation had hoped. But something was wrong. The swarm ships weren't attacking everything in their path like they had centuries ago. They moved with purpose, as if they were following specific orders. Admiral received the first reports while he was celebrating what he thought was his victory. "Sir, the swarm is active, but they're not attacking our monitoring stations. They seem to be ignoring us." "What do you mean ignoring us?" "They're heading straight for the outer rim territories, sir, but they're not stopping to consume anything along the way. It's like they have a specific destination in mind." Felt cold dread creep into his heart. What destination? The answer came sooner than he expected. The swarm ships reached the edge of former human space and stopped. They arranged themselves in perfect formations, waiting. Then, one by one, the human ghost ships began to materialize around them. Stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as hundreds of ghost fleet vessels phased into normal space. Around them, swarm ships took protective positions, like loyal guardians serving their masters. "Open a channel to all Confederation forces," ordered. Across the galaxy, every Confederation ship, base, and colony received the same transmission. It showed standing on her bridge with swarm ships visible through the windows behind her. Admiral said, looking directly into the camera, "Thank you for waking our friends. We've been waiting 300 years for this reunion." The transmission switched to show the space around's fleet. Thousands of swarm ships moved in perfect coordination with the human ghost fleet. It was clear who was giving the orders. "You see," continued, "while you were hiding in Andromeda, we were learning. We discovered that the swarm was never truly evil. It was just lost, confused, acting on old programming. We taught it new goals. We gave it a new purpose." Image smiled coldly. The swarm now serves humanity. Every ship, every biomechanical construct, every weapon they possess is under our control. You tried to use our greatest enemy against us, and instead gave us the most powerful fleet in galactic history. The transmission showed swarm ships beginning to move again, but now they were heading for Confederation colonies. Not to destroy them, but to surround them. "This brings us to the end of our little war," said. "You have a choice to make, just like the one you gave us 3 centuries ago. You can serve as our protectors and warriors, or you can face the swarm alone." Admiral sat in stunned silence on his command ship. Around him, his crew watched in horror as swarm vessels surrounded their position. The biomechanical ships could have destroyed them in seconds, but they simply waited. "Admiral," his communications officer said with a shaking voice, "we're receiving surrender requests from colonies across the galaxy. They want to know the terms of human occupation." Transmission continued. "We're not interested in genocide. We're not like you. We offer the same deal we were never given: partnership. But this time, humanity leads and you follow." The terms offered were simple. The Confederation species could continue to live on their worlds and work in their industries, but they would serve under human leadership. They would provide support for human colonies and help rebuild the worlds that had been lost. Most importantly, they would ensure that no species would ever again be abandoned to die for the convenience of others. "You see," explained, "we learned something important during our exile. The strong don't survive by abandoning the weak. They survive by protecting them, by making sure everyone has a chance to grow and adapt." Within hours, Confederation leaders across the galaxy were transmitting their surrender. They had no choice. Their most powerful weapons couldn't touch the ghost ships, and the swarm fleet was now completely under human control. Admiral was the last to surrender, appeared on his bridge in person, materializing like a vengeful spirit from his worst nightmares. He said quietly, using her first name for the first time, I'm sorry for what we did to your people." Studied the old alien who had condemned her species to exile and evolution. Sorry doesn't bring back Earth. Sorry doesn't restore the 10 billion humans who died in the quantum bombing. Sorry doesn't give back the 300 years of suffering your people caused. Lowered his head. "What happens to me?" "You live with what you did," said. "You'll spend the rest of your life helping to build the new galaxy we're creating. A galaxy where no species gets left behind, where the strong protect the weak instead of abandoning them." Turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and you'll be working directly under Lieutenant Admiral Sarah's great-great-granddaughter. I thought you should know whose family you'll be answering to." 6 months later, stood on the observation deck of New Terra Station, looking out at the bustling spaceport below. Former Confederation ships worked alongside human vessels and even modified swarm craft. The 3 fleets had been integrated into a single massive force dedicated to exploring and protecting the galaxy. Children played in the station's parks, human children, alongside young aliens of a dozen different species. They were learning together, growing up in a world where cooperation replaced abandonment. Thought about Admiral Sarah and the choice she had made 3 centuries ago. Sarah had sacrificed everything to ensure humanity's survival. Now humanity was using its strength to make sure no other species would face the same choice. A young human officer approached her. "Commander, the Council of Echoes is ready for the final vote." Nodded. The council was deciding whether to establish permanent colonies in other galaxies, spreading their new philosophy of mutual protection across the universe. It was an ambitious plan, but humanity had learned that impossible things were just challenges waiting for the right solution. "Tell them I'll be there in a moment," said. She took one last look at the busy spaceport. Ships from dozens of species worked together, protected by the combined fleets of humanity and their former enemies. It wasn't the galaxy that Admiral Sarah had died defending, but it was the galaxy she would have wanted to see. smiled and headed to the council chamber. Humanity's revenge was complete, not through destruction, but through transformation. They had turned their greatest enemy into their strongest ally and their betrayers into their protectors. Most importantly, they had ensured that no species would ever again face extinction alone. The Ghost Fleet had become the guardians of the galaxy, and the galaxy was finally safe for everyone.